Two Beers, Episode 70, Spider-Man, the Animated Series.
Spidey, can you swing us across with your web?
No, I can't swing you across. And it's Spider-Man, not Spidey.
I'm pretty sure I've heard people call you Spidey.
Yeah, close friends. What's your name?
Peter?
Hey, Petey, do stuff for me.
Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, you don't like it. And you're a fat nobody, and I'm Spider-Man, so how do you think I feel?
Hello, and welcome to episode 70 of Two Geeks, Two Beers. With your friendly neighborhood podcasters, it's me, Morgan, and my partner in danger, Tom.
Hello, and 70 episodes, wow, that's pretty good.
It's a landmark, and to celebrate, sort of, this episode, we're web-slinging back to the 90s to revisit an animated outing for Spider-Man, Radioactive Spider-Man. It's been at least a couple of weeks since we've done an episode about a 90s cartoon series based off a Marvel comic. So I'm donning my lycra and strapping on my web shooters to shoot some nostalgia right in your face.
Yes.
So, Tom.
Yeah.
Spider-Man the Animated Series, or Spider-Man TAS for short.
Taz.
It aired in the US on the Fox Kids network from November 19th, 1994 to January the 31st, 1998. But I first saw it aired as part of Live and Kicking, the popular kids Saturday morning entertainment series, which was aptly dissected by your good self back in episode 61 of this very podcast. And my memory, and correct me if I'm wrong, listeners, was that Spider-Man would air during the X-Men animated show's off-season. So you'd always have one of either Spider-Man or X-Men airing on Saturday mornings. Now, Tom, you were a Live and Kicking kid, but not especially a superhero enthusiast in your youth.
No.
So was this a show that was tingling your Spidey senses?
I've got to say, I don't remember it being on Live and Kicking. It's really weird. Like, I remember X-Men vividly being on Live and Kicking, but like, I'm sure maybe if you play me some clips in a minute, I might remember it, but I just don't have much recollection of it existing.
I would say that maybe Spider-Man was on in the summer and you were out kicking a ball around or something, but that's probably not true, don't we?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to look back and see if it rekindles anything. But yeah, I remember I was never that big into. I've said before about that much into my comics and superheroes and all that kind of stuff back then. So it might have been a case of, for me personally, when Spider-Man came, I was like, right, time to get a cup of tea or something. I wasn't as bothered. So I've been looking forward to the history lesson now.
I wasn't bothered, but now I'm really up for it.
Well, now I am. That was probably me peaking coolness-wise back then, because I wasn't into my nerdy stuff. Whereas now, so I'm catching up. Put it that way. I peaked socially when I was about 9 years old.
Running for a total of 5 seasons and 65 episodes. For many years, Spider-Man was the second longest-running Marvel show created after X-Men, as well as the longest-running series based on Spider-Man until Ultimate Spider-Man surpassed its record in 2015. Now, this show was, you've just snubbed it entirely, this show was one of my biggest obsessions as a kid. A very important show for me. I sort of remembered quite how important it was, quite how obsessed I was with it, looking back for this episode. And I'm actually surprised it has taken us 70 episodes to get it, to be honest.
Were you already into Spider-Man, or was this what got you into Spider-Man?
A little bit of both. Already into my Spidey, but this definitely upped the obsession. The obsession began to grow.
Did you like relate to him?
What are you saying?
No, I'm just saying, like, of all the superheroes, he's the most one like us, isn't he? Like, because we're not Tony Stark, we're not Bruce Wayne, but Peter Parker.
That was the point when Stan Lee created Spider-Man. He was like, I wanted a character that readers could relate to. He was like the kids reading the comics. He couldn't pay his bills, and his Aunt May needed medicine, but he could also swing from a web like a spider. It's like he's back.
I know. Yeah.
But it has taken us 70 episodes to get here, and I was sort of wondering why. And I think maybe because this was such a big part of my childhood, I was a little bit intimidated, and I wanted to make sure I did it justice. in a Two Geeks episode, and now you're going to hear me spectacularly fail to do that. So I was so obsessed, I even had, and this is something I'd completely forgotten about until I researched this episode, I had the Spider-Man Cartoon Maker.
What's that?
It was an amazing game for the PC released in 1995, and it was sort of like a very basic version of iMovie or one of those programs, and it had pre-installed backgrounds and animation and sound effects, and you could make your own Spider-Man episodes with it.
It's quite a niche. Did it do it for any other shows? Or was that the only one that did it?
Well, they later released an X-Men Cartoon Maker, and when you installed both, you could then use X-Men characters in Spider-Man and make your own crossovers happen. I mean, who needs Girls and Sunshine?
It's your own cinematic universe.
Not me. So this is, again, something I rediscovered.
I remember, on that subject, I remember Simpsons had one of those as well, I seem to remember.
Yeah.
That was a really good cartoon studio game. It's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same makers.
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
But I love this show so much, and I rediscovered this researching this episode, that, as you well know, Tom, you know me pretty well, my knowledge of world politics, science, geography, mathematics, all but non-existent. But I can quote word perfect Spider-Man's opening lines from season 2, episode 1, The Insidious Six, which I promise I have not watched in at least 15 years, but it's just in there. It's in there.
What, the dialogue?
The dialogue. So
how long?
So it goes.
I'll just strap ourselves in. This will be good.
It goes, and you can put the clip in afterwards to prove I got it right. Look at them down there. I bet each one has somebody close. I feel so distant. I have nobody. Except for you, of course. You're always here for me. You're rock solid. And best of all, you laugh at all my jokes. Bruce, you're a heck of a guy. But I do wish I had someone prettier to talk to, like maybe Felicia Hardy. And then there's Mary Jane Watson. Those are the opening lines to that episode. I have no idea why that's still in my head now. And you can test, I was not looking at my screen.
You weren't looking, no.
I was not reading that. And here's the clip to prove I got it at least mostly right.
Look at them down there. I bet each one has somebody close. I feel so distant. I have nobody. Except you, of course. You're always here for me. You're rock solid. And best of all, you laugh at all my jokes. Bruce, you're a heck of a guy. But I do wish I had someone a little prettier to talk to. Like maybe Felicia Hardy.
Very good. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think...
So if you're a mastermind, that your specialist subject, the intro to a specific episode of Spider-Man Taz.
Yeah, Humphreys, he just goes, what's your specialist subject? I can quote the opening monologue from the Spider-Man animated series episode, The Insidious Six. Does that count? I think the reason, though, I love this show was it was more colourful and light-hearted than, for example, Batman the Animated Series, which was the intention of the creative team at the time. They wanted a brighter visual aesthetic to distinguish it from Batman's dark, noirish, Art Deco-inspired look. But it also, despite some limitations, which we will get into, I would say it boasted some quite sophisticated storytelling. So there were some dark themes, some quite scary moments. And if the episode where Spider-Man transformed into a giant humanoid spider didn't give you nightmares, you were a tough little bastard. That's all I've got to say. I mean, possibly you watched that episode and were so traumatized that you just blanked Spider-Man from your memory.
Well, likelihood is they probably watched Animals of Fighting Wood first, so they're already steeled for that.
True. So this show also, it featured season-long story arcs, pretty sophisticated, each with their own subtitle, like Neogenic Nightmare, Sins of the Father, and Partners in Danger, hence my rib-tickling introduction. And the show also had a lot of heart, and I think a lot of that is down to the lead performance from Christopher Daniel Barnes as Peter Parker, which has a really lovely, earnest quality to it. Now, we've talked before about sort of sights and sounds and voices even that can just transport you back to your childhood.
Well, they bite into your history, don't they?
And Christopher Daniel Barnes' voice bites into my history like nothing else. It leaves teeth marks in my past is what it does.
You know, the thing that I find interesting about the character is that it goes through time. And I've done a lot of voiceover work, and I've actually done a lot of Spider-Man-esque stuff. You know, I've played villains, and I've played different characters on different shows and video games, and there have been a lot of different Spider-Men. And one of the things I always remark about is that, you know, it really is a responsibility. You are sort of the current avatar of this Marvel deity. you know, and it's something to be taken seriously because, you know, this is our Iliad, this is our Odyssey, you know, these comics, this is our mythology, and this is our passion. I mean, if it wasn't, look at what we're doing here. Look at this whole place. Yeah. It's because we love this mythos. It touches something universal in us. So when you get a chance to actually be the voice of that character, that means something. You know, it means something for a generation. It means something for an experience that people relate to for years. And you know, it's not just a job. And I think that's one of the things that made the show so great was that we all, like we've talked about, it was like a radio show. We were all in the booth together and we were all interacting with each other. And you feed off of that and it brings it to life. And the show was a half-hour drama. You know, like I said, it was a real show. It was a real story. And so the way I approached it, the way it made me feel, and the way that everybody else felt about it, that's what makes this show, 20 years later, have a full room when there are a lot of other things going on. Because I think you guys felt it too, you know, and you appreciate it, and I think a lot of people do. And it was just such an honor to be a part of it.
He still sounds the same as well. Still sounds the same. Literally gives me tingles. My spider sense is tingling whenever I hear that.
So if you were in that room at Kamikaze, as it was called there, what would your emotions be like?
Just be like, talk to me, Christopher.
If your name's Christopher and you're listening to this, then you're in luck.
It's gonna take that
over and over again.
Yeah. But Christopher Daniel Barnes' voice wasn't the only bit of oral pleasure, AURAL, that Spider-Man provided. This is why I shouldn't go off book. I should go off my notes. That was improvised. Spider-Man, the animated series, also had a rocking theme tune, and you knew you were in for a good time when you heard this.
Wow, they really went for it back then, didn't they? They always got the guitar solos out, and
come on,
that was good.
Spider blood, radioactive spider blood. Now there is an interesting backstory to that theme. So the distributors on Spider-Man, you don't often start an interesting bit of trivia with the distributors were, but the distributors on Spider-Man the animated series were Saban Entertainment, formed by partners Haim Saban and Shuki Levy. And
hang on. I think I know these guys.
Yeah, well, you probably will, because, interestingly, for the type of person who listens to this podcast, at least, including you, Tom, they were known for importing, dubbing, and adapting several Japanese series to the US, including the original Power Rangers.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And they also co-produced animated classics like Ulysses 31, subject of a previous Two Geeks episode, and Jason the Wheeled Warriors. But Saban Entertainment was also responsible for Spider-Man's music. Now, the theme for the series was performed by Joe Perry, the lead guitarist of Aerosmith.
Oh, Aerosmith. Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
Although the song was credited as being written by Shuki Levy. Now, on paper, Shuki Levy, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name, but on paper, this guy should be recognized as a musical god. Because not only did he give us Power Rangers and Ulysses 31, but he is credited with composing the music for more than 130 television series. Included, he is said to have written or co-written the theme tunes to Inspector Gadget, the theme song to The Mysterious Cities of Gold, which I exposed you to and you loved it.
Yeah.
The theme to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, He-Man, and many more, mainly alongside Haim Saban. Now, these guys are like on paper, they're like the Mozart and Beethoven, the John and Paul.
You go to these guys if you need a theme tune.
If you need a kids' TV theme in the 80s, you go to these guys. However, in 2007, a Hollywood Reporter investigation claimed that Levy and Saban were in fact taking credit for other composers' work. That's never been proven, it has to be said, just in case, I don't know, there's a legal team listening to this. But officially, they are still credited with composing those themes.
That's a shame.
It's a real shame.
Yeah.
So, Spider-Man, the animated series, was not the first Spider-Man animated series, though it is widely considered to be one of the best, if not the best. Prior to this, you'd had the first animated Spider-Man series, which ran from 1967 to 1970, now best remembered for its catchy theme song.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man. Well, I was going to say that one you just played me was sort of a weird remix of that, a little bit. It was doing the same lyrics.
Well, apparently they were a big fan of the 60s theme. What do you mean? It's the same lyrics. What, Spider-Man, Spider-Man?
No, but it even gets the next bit, does whatever a spider can.
No, it doesn't.
It does it really like low key in it? You can hear it.
If you say so. So that version of the show, the 60s version, is now best remembered for its catchy theme song. It's Spider-Man pointing at himself meme. Of course, and its questionable attitude towards female characters.
Golly, Susan, why can't you go with me to the harvest hop?
I guess I'm just too busy, Peter. Oh, look, there's Roy Robinson, star player on the team.
That guy, Robinson. Not only is he Mr. Big around school to all the gals, but his dad is rich. Owns the Robinson Chemical Laboratories outside town. Gets all those big top-secret government contracts.
Oh, hi, Princess. Still going around with little boys, eh?
Hey, listen, Robinson, I got a mind to...
Oh, Peter, don't be such a poor sport. Roy was only joking.
Yeah, I'd like to joke him. He'll be joking out of the other side of his face.
Oh, Peter Parker, you make me so mad. Why don't you try out for the team if you're such a big hero? Goodbye.
Oh, Susan, come back. I was only... Oh, holy cats, what's the use? Women.
Very funny.
That
Women.
guy Robinson, boy howdy, I sure like to show him.
It's just the way Robinson goes up to him and goes, "Hey, Peter Parker, what's up?" Doesn't even let him finish. He just laughs instantly and walks off. God, very funny.
So that version of the show was followed in the 1980s by both a solo Spider-Man show and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, which saw him team up with the X-Men's Iceman and a new character, Firestar, who was created specifically for this series when the Fantastic Four's Human Torch proved unavailable due to licensing issues.
Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, Iceman and Firestar. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Yeah, Amazing Friends. Amazing. I feel like the other two are doing most of the work there. I feel like they've got the actual powers and skills, whereas he just kind of swings about a bit.
That's why he keeps them around. I don't know exactly why as well. The pad, the very trendy pad that Spider-Man shares with His Amazing Friends, is all kitted out with like incredible tech. Maybe Reed Richards sorted them out or something. I don't know. So this 90s show was only the fourth Spider-Man animated series in the 3 decades since the character was first created, and it focused on Spider-Man and his alter ego Peter Parker during life after high school. It was very much Spider-Man the college years as he attended Empire State University. Though dialogue suggests it takes place early in Spider-Man's career, the show opens with Spidey already established, so it skips that pesky origin story. But there was a reason for that. It was to avoid a clash with a Spider-Man origin movie that was in the works at the time, to be directed by James Cameron. Now, do you know about this?
No.
So, Leonardo DiCaprio was allegedly being eyed to play Spidey with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Dr. Octopus. Of course.
Amazing.
Ah, my arms! My metallic arms! Would have been great.
It's funny because I have to admit, I'd never really realised that Spider-Man was normally like a high school kid until the Sam Raimi films came out. Because I think I only had knowledge of watching like cartoons like this 90s one, where he just looks like a bloke, like a really buff man. It doesn't look like a scrawny kid. That's all, but it makes a lot more sense now.
So, reflecting a lot of our own body issues, I think. But he can't be a young kid. He's buff. He's in shape. Scrawny like me. So the producer / story editor, or showrunner in modern parlance, for the show was John Semper Jr. Now, Semper, he had previously written for Alvin and the Chipmunks, Super Friends, not to be confused with Spider-Man is Amazing Show, DuckTales, and he created the English language dialogue for two of Miyazaki's acclaimed animated features, Laputa Castle in the Sky from 1986 and Kiki's Delivery Service from 1989. And he was the primary credited writer on Spider-Man. He wrote 8 episodes solo and received some sort of writing credit on 60 of the 65 produced episodes. Semper was a late hire after the show faced some early pre-production woes. When he joined Spider-Man, the show was way behind schedule, and it was down to him to very quickly set the template of what he wanted the show to be. And when he got the job, Semper's first demand was to make Fox and Marvel buy him a complete collection of Spider-Man comics for research. Sure, John, sure. But as a result, the show pulls from the best bits from across all of Spider-Man canon, and many of the show's episodes were loose adaptations of comic book storylines from across the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and Stan Lee even had an influence on the show in the first 13 episodes, even writing scenes on the show uncredited. Semper apparently faced resistance in his desire to do season-long story arcs, which I talked about before, but he fought back, and the show featured slow burn subplots like Eddie Brock's life in season 1 gradually falling apart as an indirect result of Spider-Man's actions, foreshowing his vendetta against Spidey and his transformation into Venom. Ooh.
Clever.
Thought it was over, didn't you, Spider-Man? You made a fool of Eddie Brock whenever you could. It cost me my job, my reputation, my health, my apartment. You just won't stop till you ruin me, will you? You can't do this.
I already have.
You're fired. I'll get even with you if it's the last thing I do. Rejected the symbiote. Only wanted to make you stronger. Well, surprise, surprise. Now, we're one. Now, you're gonna pay. From now on, we're poison to you, Spider-Man. That's why we call ourselves Venom.
Now, you were talking about Spider-Man being buff. What you couldn't see there, listeners, was that not only does Eddie Brock have an incredible flat-top haircut, he also has pecs, sans nipples, and they're bigger than his head. It's quite a sight.
Maybe Arnie could have played him.
Yeah, he's definitely got the physique for it. Another running thread that ran throughout almost the entire show saw Spider-Man being sent on missions by the mystic being Madam Web, who was voiced by Stan Lee's wife, Joan Lee, in preparation for a mysterious ultimate battle. Visually, Semper said he drew inspiration from the comics, so the show's visuals were a mixture of CGI backgrounds with traditional animated characters based on the work of iconic Spidey artist John Romita Sr. Now, the show's animation quality, it was variable. It could be excellent, almost anime-inspired, but reuse of animation became more common as the series progressed. So sometimes dialogue was applied to old animation, so the lip syncing just didn't match up anymore. And this was most noticeable in the 5th season, which featured more reused shots than ever before, apparently because scripts were delivered late and there was less time to work up new animation. Limits to the animation also meant that characters often wore just the one outfit throughout the show, including Peter Parker, who did at least get an upgrade after the first season from a garish striped mint green polo shirt and jeans combo.
Okay, nice.
It's definitely a look. And then in season 2, he upgraded to a more stylish maroon tee and charcoal grey jacket ensemble.
Yeah, he looks more stylish in the second one. Like the first one, he looks like he should be down the golf course.
Also, I think the jacket had the double benefit of better disguising his Spidey outfit. Because why would a superhero wear a short sleeved polo shirt? He has to like every time he transforms, he has to like roll his sleeves down. And how does he even roll his sleeves up when he's got the web shooters attached? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you think about it. It's a whole can of worms, can of spiders. Also, it has to be said, sometimes there were just odd choices being made animation-wise, like in season 2, episode 1. So the villain, the Shocker, who'd previously been captured by Spider-Man, he's seen in jail, and he's seen in jail wearing his prison uniform over his costume. Like they wouldn't make him take it off. They're like, no, that's cool, Shocker. Whatever makes you comfortable.
I think how smelly that would be after a certain amount of time. Let's have a look. That's not his face. That's his actual outfit.
He's wearing a full supervillain outfit and mask under his. He's like, I'm not wearing that prison uniform. They're like, you got to. He's like, all right, I'll do it, but on one condition.
What?
I get to keep the other costume on underneath. They're like, fine.
Like if Batman kept his whole Bruce Wayne got jailed, but he kept the Batman outfit on underneath.
But he's got the prison uniform on, but you could just see the mask still poking out.
Yeah.
Where would the cape go? I don't even want to think about it. So, despite those fun quirks, part of what made Spider-Man so exciting was that the show was also part of an MAU, or Marvel Animated Universe. It featured appearances from various other Marvel superheroes, including the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, War Machine, Daredevil, Blade, Doctor Strange, the Punisher, and Captain America.
Amazing.
So, all those heroes guested on Spider-Man at various points. And the 2-part crossover featuring the X-Men, and it includes the original voice cast from the X-Men animated series. That is a real highlight of the series. At the time, it was just like the dream. Like my 2 favourite shows at the time crossing over. And Spider-Man, though, he was apparently forbidden from crossing over into other shows, apart from the odd sneaky cameo. I'm not entirely sure why, but I do remember you briefly see Spider-Man's silhouette and his wrist just fire a web.
I remember you mentioning that.
Yeah, in a montage scene in X-Men. And it blew my little 8-year-old mind.
Kids don't know they're born now, do they?
No, when he shot his web fluid, I shot my fluid. That's how excited I was about it. And you're right, kids are spoiled now, because as amazing as it is to have something like the MCU, getting excited over little moments like that, little brief cameos, kids now will never experience that.
No. Just used to it.
And an episode proposed for either season 5 or 6 of the show would have seen Spider-Man teamed up with Ghost Rider to fight the dread Dormammu.
I've come to bargain.
However, this was later scrapped as UPN were developing a Ghost Rider cartoon, and Fox didn't want to give free promotion to a rival network, although ultimately the Ghost Rider series never materialized. But despite taking inspiration from comic book storylines and featuring significant ties to the wider Marvel universe, Spider-Man did make some significant changes to the source material. So there were new backstories and tweaked powers for certain of the show's villains. It removed all references to radioactivity and Spider-Man having been bitten by a radioactive spider. This was swapped out in favor of a fictional science called neogenics. The one exception, of course, being the show's theme song, which contains repeated references to radioactive Spider-Man and his radioactive spider blood, which I guess just slipped through the net or web. Though it featured many of Spider-Man's classic villains, including the Green Goblin, the Lizard, the Shocker, as we just saw, Dr. Octopus, Mysterio, the Scorpion, Rhino, the Vulture, and Venom, the Sandman was absent, while Electro didn't appear until the very final episodes. Again, because those 2 characters were set to be the villains in the Spider-Man movie being developed by James Cameron. Felicia Hardy, the character Black Cat, she was merged with the character of Gwen Stacy from the comics. So unlike in the comics where Black Cat is merely a cat burglar and vigilante, here Felicia is also a student contemporary of Peter Parker's and his love interest. And one change came about for an unusual reason. So whereas in the comics, the Green Goblin was the original and the Hobgoblin was a sort of spin-off character, here the Hobgoblin came first. This was a decision made before John Semper joined the team, by which time an action figure of Hobgoblin was already in development and it was too late to turn that ship around. Semper would apparently often have disagreements with Avi Arad, who at the time had the interesting conflict of being both the CCO of Marvel Entertainment and the CEO of the company Toy Biz, which produced the show's toy line. Now, is that okay?
Wouldn't get away with it now, I don't think.
Semper said, I had to do the Hobgoblin first, or else Avi would have lost millions of dollars on useless Hobgoblin toys that no kid wanted. Nobody really liked the character that much. Now, this is something we touched on in our X-Men episode previously. Spider-Man was subject to censorship from the conservative Fox Kids network, who were concerned by fantasy violence after shows including Power Rangers and Batman were banned in other countries. So the series had to abide by the following guidelines. No punching, which often led to, it has to be said, particularly between Spider-Man and the Kingpin, just engaging in awkward, some would say erotically charged wrestling.
Why can't you punch? What's wrong with that?
Because then kids might discover that punching is a thing.
Yeah, but they've been watching, like, surely Batman punched a few people in his time.
Yeah, and it got banned because of it.
Yeah, still.
No realistic firearms.
Right.
No breaking of windows or indeed images of broken glass. All deaths had to occur off screen. Characters were not even allowed to say words related to or implying death. So no dead, died, or killed. He was destroyed was the quite literally deathless sentence that was often used. Supervillain squad, the Sinister Six, had to change their name to the Insidious Six because sinister was too scary a word. I don't know who decided that. Who's the word police? Who's the word police? There I go. Insidious is fine. Sinister, it's too much. Too much. It'll blow their little minds. But strangest of all, the show featured the villain Morbius, who was a vampire, but he wasn't allowed to bite people or suck their blood, or even say the word blood. Instead, and I think this is worse. I think this is more gross. He drained their plasma through pulsing suction cups in the palms of his hands.
Well, that's a bit.
He used to
bit much, isn't it?
He used to be like, "I drain your plasma," and you would see like the horrible little holes in his hands pulsing away. Ugh, it was disgusting.
You went Scottish during that impression. I drain your plasma.
It's Transylvania by way of Edinburgh. Or by way of Glasgow, perhaps. Yeah. Felicia, I'm going to drain your plasma. I've been turned into this wee vampire by that neogenic nightmare. But in a podcast interview in November 2014, John Semper said that actually many kids shows at the time were subject to the same rulings. It's just people remember Spider-Man because it was good. And though Fox did exert a good deal of creative control over the series, Marvel itself had very little say over the series because at the time the company was in dire straits and close to bankruptcy, which is famously why they sold off the film rights to Spider-Man to Sony. But I can't talk about Spider-Man the animated series without talking about the voice cast because it is such a varied and interesting collection of actors. So bear with me because it is quite a long list, but I will rattle through them as quickly as I can.
Okay.
So obviously as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, you've got Christopher Daniel Barnes, who I may have mentioned him. I may have a bit of a man crush on the guy. He also voiced Prince Eric in The Little Mermaid.
Oh.
And was known for his on-screen portrayal of Greg Brady in the films The Brady Bunch movie and A Very Brady Sequel, which, if you ever see those movies, he's got Spider-Man's voice. It's really weird. I mean, it's not a surprise.
How do I manage to find all these nutcases? Where do they come from? And how do I get them to go back?
J. Jonah Jameson, Spider-Man's boss at the Daily Bugle, was voiced by Ed Asner, who...
That's Geeks' favourite.
Yeah, notorious.
Ed Asner.
Notoriously for Two Geeks fans, he's the star of the X-Files episode "How the Ghosts Stole Christmas."
Among other stuff, he's done some other stuff.
Yeah, he's also known for playing Lou Grant in both the Mary Tyler Moore Show and its spin-off Lou Grant. And he also voiced crime boss Roland Daggett in Batman the Animated Series. So he played two major comic book characters. He was very much the Ryan Reynolds or Chris Evans or Tom Hardy or Lawrence Fishburne or even the Michael B. Jordan of his day.
It's all your fault those freaks got that device stuck. Your security staff is incompetent and rude, too.
They just have a low tolerance for yellow journalism.
Yellow? How dare you use that kind of language in description of me?
Felicia Hardy, the Black Cat, was voiced by Jennifer Hale, who is a hugely prolific voice actor. In fact, in 2013, she was awarded a Guinness World Record as the most prolific video game voice actor female for her work in everything from Baldur's Gate to Metal Gear Solid to Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
Nice.
Parker gave me your note. It said you wanted to see me. What for?
To thank you for rescuing my mother and for always being there for me.
You can't. Hey, wait.
Mary Jane Watson was voiced by Sarah Ballantyne, or Ballantine, here credited by her birth name, Saratoga.
Physics is a lot like theater. It's all about making sense out of life. Once I realized that, it was easy.
Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, was voiced by Roscoe Lee Brown, who, according to Wikipedia, is an American actor and director known for his rich voice and dignified bearing. Imagine being known for your dignified bearing. It's not when I go. It's not going to say that on my Wikipedia page, is it? Let's face it.
He edited that page himself.
Yeah, definitely going to say I'm known for my dignified bearing.
Crime, my life, all of it jeopardized by the sudden appearance of Spider-Man.
Aunt May was initially voiced by Linda Gary. Gary had previously voiced a character named Colleen in an episode of the 80s Spider-Man cartoon. She also voiced Teela in He-Man, Madame Raz in She-Ra, and Grandma Longneck in Freaky franchise The Land Before Time. Movies 2 through 4, among many other roles.
All right, dear. But don't stay out too late. You sound like you're catching a bug.
I certainly hope so.
What?
But she sadly died after completing work on Spider-Man's first season and was replaced from season 2 onwards by Julie Bennett, who was a veteran TV actress and voice artist going back to the early 1950s and is perhaps best known for voicing Cindy Bear on Yogi Bear cartoons for nearly 3 decades.
Yeah.
Spider-Man the Animated Series was her final regular voice acting role, and I found out she sadly passed away in March of this year, aged 88, from complications related to COVID-19. Very sad.
Peter, where have you been?
Out jogging.
Wearing a blanket?
Harry Osborn, Peter Parker's best friend, he was played by Gary Imhoff, who is best known for playing Curtis Estabrook on the TV series Falcon Crest, and for providing the voice of Prince Cornelius in the Don Bluth film Thumbelina.
Hey, Pete, you almost missed our big housewarming. Don't just stand there. Gotta go take care of the guests.
Joe Robbie Robertson, who worked with Peter at the Daily Bugle, he was voiced by Rodney Salisbury, who was known for his voice work. His 3 books, You Can Bank on Your Voice, Step Up to the Mic, and Rodney Salisbury's Tongue Twisters and Vocal Warm-Ups. He was the host of the popular podcast Success Talks with Rodney Salisbury, and he is also known for his musical output, including 4 solo albums, 1984's self-titled Rodney Salisbury, 2008's Better Than Before, 2014's Crazy About Your Love, and 2019's Christmas with Rodney Salisbury.
Is Rodney making all this material just for like himself and his mum, or like? I'm sure he's a talented fella, but
Wikipedia says he has a popular podcast.
Does he though?
And he's put out 4. Have you put out 4 albums? No, you haven't. Granted, there was a gap between 1984 and 2008. I can't even do the maths on that, but there's a long gap between his first and second album.
The hotly anticipated second album.
But the title, it's all in the title. He came back better than before.
I used to defend you against Jonah. Told him the city was better off because of you. Maybe I was wrong.
Coming from Robbie, that hurt.
In 2007, he returned to Marvel Animation, voicing James Rhodes' War Machine in the animated film The Invincible Iron Man. And his character's son, Randy Robertson, was voiced by Alfonso Ribeiro. Carlton from The Fresh Prince.
Well, he probably has a far more popular podcast than we do.
That's true. Yeah, don't scoff. Nowhere does it say on Wikipedia that we carry ourselves with a dignified bearing, nor that we have a popular podcast.
We'll never ever be on Wikipedia. Let's be honest.
Not even in a negative way. Other notable cast members included J.D. Hall as Blade, who also, I found out, he played the Phantom's mentor, Garan, in Phantom 2040. And, of interest to two Geeks fans, again, he narrated The Scorpion King 3, Battle for Redemption.
Oh, dear. Dreadful.
And is also believed to have contributed vocals for the Hulk and the Abomination for The Incredible Hulk, the MCU movie. Malcolm McDowell, he played Blade's partner, Whistler. And Nichelle Nichols, Uhura from Star Trek, she played Blade's mother. Dr. Octopus was voiced by Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., who also voiced Alfred in Batman the Animated Series. Jim Cummings, who was the voice of Winnie the Pooh and Tigger and the Tasmanian Devil, played the Shocker. Maxwell Caulfield getting his second shout-out, unbelievably, on a Two Geeks episode. Yeah. Star of Grease 2 and played James Bond in the video game Nightfire. He played the villain, Alistair Smythe. The Red Skull and the Beyonder were both voiced by Earl Bowen, Dr. Silberman from the Terminator movies. Scorpion was voiced for the first two seasons of Spider-Man by Martin Landau, who became unavailable after winning an Oscar for Ed Wood, and then I guess decided he was just too good for it. John Vernon, the Dean from Animal House, he played Doctor Strange with George Takei as Wong.
This goes on and on forever.
There's such a good cast list. Strange's nemesis, Baron Mordo, was voiced, and you might know this name, by Tony Jay.
Oh, yeah, no, I know who you mean. Yeah.
Megabyte in Reboot.
Yeah.
And
amazing.
Nigel St. John in Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. What career.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Norman Osborn was played by Neil Ross, who was a prolific voice actor. But interestingly, he played the same character in the 1980 Spider-Man series. He was the only actor to do so. He also played Nightcrawler in the X-Men animated pilot, Pride of the X-Men, and Rambo in Rambo, the Force of Freedom animated series.
What? An animated Rambo series? Who's that for?
Oh, if you not right, I'm gonna totally off topic, but let's watch the title sequence for the Rambo animated series.
Why? They made an animated series of everything.
Rambo. Anywhere and everywhere, the savage forces of General Warhawk threaten the peace-loving people of the world. There's only one man to call. Get me Rambo. From the canyons of skyscrapers to the canyons of remote mountain peaks, Liberty's champion is unstoppable. Rambo, helped by the mechanical genius known as Turbo, and the master of disguises named Cat, the honor-bound protector of the innocent. Rambo, the force of freedom.
That could not be more 80s. From the voiceover to the supporting cast, was it assisted by a technical genius known as Turbo? Of course he is. Of course he is.
How come Spider-Man can't punch people, yet there's a cartoon of Rambo knifing people to death?
Well
he's not carrying that knife for fun, is he?
You saw Rambo there in that opening sequence, put his knife into his sheath, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure he ever took it out. I think it remained there, and then he was probably just erotically wrestling a lot of people like Spider-Man was.
I'm assuming Stallone didn't turn up for that.
He did not. He didn't. No, that was no. Hank Azaria of Simpsons fame. He played Eddie Brock and Venom. The Prowler, the supervillain, the Prowler, was voiced by Tim Russ, Tuvok from Star Trek Voyager. Mark Hamill played the Hobgoblin, and I love Mark Hamill, but it has to be said, in a performance remarkably similar to that of the Joker in Batman the Animated Series. You can edit this in later. Let's hear a clip of the Joker.
This has all been worked out far in advance, Francis. You are merely the last tiny cog in my grand design. So don't speak to me again. Okay?
And now here's a bit of Hobgoblin.
For once in my life, I had everything. And then you had to find this room.
A great voice actor, but remarkably similar. And finally, I'm reaching the end of this section. David Hayter an incredible career, played Solid Snake in the Metal Gear Solid series and also worked as a screenwriter on X-Men and X2. And in this, he voiced Captain America.
Amazing.
I'm Captain America, I'm Solid Snake, and I wrote X2, one of the finest superhero movies of all time. What a guy.
What I read about.
David
I feel
Hayter.
like, you've pretty much listed every single voice actor going of the time. So, yeah.
They all played a part in Spider-Man the Animated Series. What can I say? But Spider-Man, unusually, it has to be said, for a subject of the Two Geeks episode, was a critical and commercial success. What? We don't know. I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what to do. It was a ratings hit for Fox Kids. It won a number of awards. Roscoe Lee Brown and Ed Asner were both nominated for Daytime Emmys for their performances. Wow. And it won an NAACP award, an Image Award for Outstanding Animated / Live Action / Dramatic Youth or Children's Series / Special, which I'm sure is very prestigious. It was a huge sensation in the 90s. It launched spin-off comics, video games, novels, and other merchandise with a toy line that actually outlasted the series. DVDs appear to be out of print, but you can pick them up secondhand, or you can actually find Spider-Man the Animated Series now. It's all available to stream on Disney+. And it was, I'd say, totally objectively, it was pretty consistently great looking back. There were only one or two slightly below par episodes, but if you did want to dip in, Tom, I would recommend the following episodes. There's the 3-part Alien Costume Saga from season 1, which introduces Venom, and also deals with the idea of Spider-Man being driven insane by a malevolent parasite without, it has to be said, resorting to emo haircuts and dance sequences. I'm throwing no shade, I'm just saying. And it also, does Spider-Man 3 have this? It features this amazing sequence of Spidey totally losing his shit with the Shocker.
I am invincible! Get back here, Shocker! Shocker! You can't escape me! I'll chase you to the ends of the earth!
I'll chase you to the ends of the earth! It's only the Shocker! Calm down!
That was a YouTube video entitled "The Most Overreacting Scene in Spider-Man History." Very funny.
Season 2's 2-part Insidious 6 premiere, which I quoted at the beginning of this podcast. That's also fun. In that, Doc Ock, Rhino, Shocker, Chameleon, Mysterio, and Scorpion all team up against Spider-Man whose powers have deserted him. Season 3 2-parter Venom Returns and Carnage. That features an Iron Man crossover. That's worth a watch. Season 3's finale, Turning Point, which sees a battle with the Green Goblin end catastrophically for Spider-Man. And, as I mentioned earlier, Season 2's 2-parter featuring the X-Men, the Mutant Agenda and Mutants' Revenge, and Season 3's Framed and The Man Without Fear, which introduced Daredevil. I'm particularly fond of those episodes, which were actually planned as a backdoor pilot for a Daredevil animated show that never happened.
Well, it's going to be better than that Rex Smith pilot you told me about last time.
It probably is better than Rex Smith's appearance in Trial of the Incredible Hulk. So this brings us on to the end of Spider-Man the Animated Series, and after a bonkers 5th and final season, Spider-Man the Animated Series finally drew to a close. Now, bear in mind, the first 4 seasons, as we've touched upon, are reasonably straightforward Spider-Man adventures, as you might expect.
In the multiverse and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, 100%. You know it.
Yeah.
You know it. In the final 13 episodes, but I mean, you got to wade through all sorts of weird shit before you even get to the multiverse. That's the weird little cherry on top of this bizarre cake. In the final 13 episodes, Peter Parker marries Mary Jane Watson, only to discover that the version he married was a clone who dies, and the real Mary Jane has been stuck in another dimension for years.
For how long? Like loads of seasons as well?
Yeah, like half the show.
Ah, shit.
He's then transported to another dimension by Madam Web for the Secret Wars storyline and must save a planet conquered by Dr. Octopus, Dr. Doom, and the Red Skull with the help of the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Captain America, and Storm from the X-Men. Then...
All very busy with it.
Do you know what it actually was? They couldn't afford to fly over the voice cast from Canada to the US, but they actually played Storm, lived locally, so they were like, get her in.
Do it on Zoom now, couldn't they?
Yeah, exactly. Now it'd be fine. Then Spider-Man is transported to another alternate dimension where he must finally face his ultimate battle against an alternate version of himself who's bonded with the Carnage symbiote to become Spider Carnage. He teams up with multiple other versions of himself from parallel universes, including Scarlet Spider and the Armored Spider-Man. This was Spider-Verse before Spider-Verse, basically.
Yeah. Were they trying to get cancelled?
Am I going mad? This is the one that's supposed to be our leader? Give me a break. I should be in charge of this group. I'm the real Spider-Man.
I don't know what kind of mind game this is, but I'm the real Spider-Man. The real Peter Parker. Guess again. See, Pete, old buddy, we're just as genuine as you are. But how can that be?
Madam Web says that we're each from different dimensions.
Reality is like a river that splits off into many parallel tributaries. These Spider-Men are from parallel realities, each as legitimate as yours. They're all you, with some slight differences.
A few things about that.
Yeah.
Why? So Spider-Man had to do this alone, but he can have help from versions of himself from an alternate reality. That's not really doing it himself. I feel like Madam Web is slightly playing with the rules there. Secondly, Peter Parker's very quick to take off his mask when he doesn't actually know who these other Spider-Men are. He's just like, I'm Peter Parker. What are you going to do?
I need some nerd explanation here. So, is Spider-Man always the one that did the whole multiverse thing, or has that always existed in other Marvel characters as well, or is it just very much a Spider-Man thing?
No, I think various comics and superheroes have explored the whole parallel universe idea. It just so happens that this crops up in this series and has come to popular attention recently with the Spider-Verse movie.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Emerging triumphant. We haven't finished. Emerging triumphant, Spider-Man arrives in our world where he is a fictional character, and he meets Stan Lee playing himself, who then flirts with Madam Web, who, lest we forget, is voiced by his own wife.
Oh, don't do Red Dwarf back to Earth. No one wants it. It's
Gee, you're definitely not the same guy I've been writing about all these years.
Well, Stan, we all have to grow up sometime, I suppose. Even us, characters of fiction.
Spider-Man, it's time to go.
Who is that exotic lady?
Oh, her? Now, she's my ride. It's been great meeting you. Take care of yourself.
You too, Spider-Man. Farewell and good luck. Wow, I wonder how I'm supposed to get down from here. I suppose I could wait for the Fantastic Four to drop by and give me a lift.
That's so when you think about that long enough, that makes so. I know it's only a cartoon, but surely Stan Lee is there's no Spider-Man in this universe because he's fiction. So how does that work? And B, Stan Lee's that would fuck his life up if that happened in real life. He'd just be like, what? And three, I'm sure I said A, B, and then three. Surely Peter would be like, what? So I'm not real, and he'd just have this existential crisis and just go, what? This is all in your head, and somehow you've created all these universes.
This was the final episode of Spider-Man the Animated Series. What you don't see after this is both Stan Lee and Peter Parker's minds crumble.
And that joke with him flirting with his own wife, that's so niche. No one will know that was the case. No one will get that joke.
Now you know, and I know, and Two Geeks listeners know.
Okay.
Who is that exotic lady? After that, as a reward for all his heroic efforts, Madam Web promises to reunite Spider-Man with the missing Mary Jane, though the series ends on a sort of cliffhanger, never actually revealing if Peter finds her. The series was reportedly cancelled despite its success because of a disagreement between Avi Arad, the executive producer, and Margaret Loesch, who was the head of Fox Kids. But John Semper did have plans for a sixth season in which Madam Web would have taken Spider-Man to 19th century London, where he would have found Mary Jane, who had amnesia. While in 19th century London, Spider-Man would have fought Carnage, who would have been revealed to be Jack the Ripper.
Right. Yeah. Charlotte Holmes there as well?
It's just a typical Saturday morning kids fair. You can't punch anyone. No broken glass, but Jack the Ripper's fine.
Yeah, do a series about an historical mass murderer. That's absolutely fine.
Season 6 would have also seen the return of Norman Osborn, who, like Mary Jane, was stranded in a limbo dimension, and the return of the Kingpin's son, Richard Fisk, who, as in the comics, would have become the crime boss, the Rose. Semper had also expressed interest in more appearances from Carnage and considered a tribute to Spider-Man and his amazing friends, with an episode featuring Iceman and Firestar, and presumably their very nifty, tech-laden pad. But it was not to be. Spidey had spun his last web. Although there was also a sort of weird quasi-sequel called Spider-Man Unlimited, which aired in 1999 for 13 episodes. Though not produced as a direct sequel, several references in the series imply that both shows are set in the same continuity. But it was cancelled after 13 episodes, following a troubled production and a mixed reception from fans. But the show's original legacy lives on, as is often the case with these things. Innovations from the series carried over into the comics and subsequent screen adaptations. So the idea of Dr. Octopus being Peter Parker's mentor and teacher, that was introduced here, and it featured in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. And the idea that the Venom symbiote increased the aggression and violence of its user carried over into Raimi's Spider-Man 3. Christopher Daniel Barnes has also continued to provide vocals for Spider-Man video games. He played Spider-Man Noir in 2010's Shattered Dimensions, and Miguel O'Hara, or Spider-Man 2099, in 2011's Spider-Man Edge of Time, playing alongside Neil Patrick Harris. And he also played Electro in 2014's Spider-Man Unlimited. Get him into the Spider-Verse too. Imagine if 90 Spidey showed up, like drawn, animated exactly the same way, and he just came into that. That'd be incredible. It'd be like seeing that little silhouette and that little wrist all over again.
I haven't seen the Spider-Verse animated film. It came out a couple of years ago. Why didn't they do that?
It can only do so much. But
that's the most famous Spider-Man cartoon there is. So why didn't they just put it in?
Well, it wasn't just we'll get all the Spider-Man cartoons and put them all together.
No, but look, they had the opportunity there, didn't they?
You had your shot.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll probably just be happy that fans loved it and it has a huge cult following. But definitely for the sequel,
yeah,
get Christopher Daniel Barnes in there.
Yeah.
And in 2014, on the show's 20th anniversary, John Semper Jr. revealed that much of the cast and crew of Spider-Man, himself included, had agreed to reunite for a new crowd-funded series entitled War of the Rocket Men. Not Spider-Man related, just a new series. However, while an Indiegogo campaign raised £14,500, it fell considerably short of its £61,000 target. And it appears plans for the series were abandoned. As a perk on the crowdfunding campaign, Semper wrote a short story, which he described as the lost episode of Spider-Man the Animated Series, detailing how Peter found Mary Jane, finally bringing a sense of closure for fans of the series. And bringing some closure to this episode. That is pretty much it.
Wow. That was quite the love letter. That was quite the love letter to Spider-Man, 1994. Yeah, well, I say I was never a massive fan of this, but having watched all the MCU films and getting into it now, I think it looks really. It looks like it's got a bit of oomph, a bit of adult oomph to it, as other series don't. Yeah, I'm intrigued. Although it did sound very bonkers by the final season. It kind of went full sliders, didn't it?
It did. And if you like a bit of adult oomph, I'd suggest you check out Spider-Man the Animated Series. As I say, it's all available on Disney+. But that's it. If we've set your Spidey senses tingling, head over to 2geeks2beers.com, where you can find all 69 of our previous episodes. If you've enjoyed this episode 18, all about X-Men the Animated Series, might make for a nice companion piece. We're also on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean. You'll find plenty more comic book themed episodes there, from the 1970s Wonder Woman live action show to Batman the Animated Series. And, if you happen to find yourself with a little more time on your hands than usual, why not spend just 5 minutes giving us a quick rating or review on whichever platform you get the podcast. You can also find clips from episodes old and new on our YouTube channel. Just put 2 Geeks, 2 Beers into YouTube and you'll find us. Maybe send a friend a little sampler of one of your favourite 2 Geeks moments.
And please do follow us on all the social channels at 2GeeksCast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for a few little goodies on there. And we're also on Patreon, so please do support us if you can. Just a tiny little bit of cash, and you can get some exclusive goodies, including a special episode you can only get there, all about our favourite films that we ranked. And if you pay us a little bit more, we'll actually do a dedicated episode on your choosing. So please head over there now.
That was actually a pretty solid sales pitch, I have to say. I'm sold. I'd do it.
Good.
Although if I paid money to myself, I think that's basically what Avi Arad was doing in the 90s. You can also email us podcast@twogeeks2videos.com. Did you love Spider-Man the animated series? Can you also quote chunks of its dialogue on demand? Get in touch at podcast@twogeeks2videos.com and make me feel less alone. I feel so distant. I have nobody. To play us out, not specific to this iteration of Spider-Man, but it does have an animated Spidey link and is very on brand for us. Here's the Spider-Man theme as performed by Michael Bublé.
What? It's amazing.
It's swing meets web-sling. See you next time. I know I touched on it earlier, but what were they thinking with Spider-Man 3? In Spider-Man the animated series, which is for kids, he basically gets infected by the alien symbiote and has a psychotic breakdown. In Spider-Man 3, which is a live-action film intended for a slightly older audience, he takes Bryce Dallas Howard to a jazz club, performs a bit of an improv routine, and is she supposed to find it attractive? And surely, like he's doing all kinds of crazy gymnastics all over the place. Surely people are going to guess he's Spider-Man. And
and that's the other thing. Not only are the girls loving it, but all the people in the bar are going, "Oh my god, yeah, what a guy! Ah, yeah." And it was he says,
"Now dig on this." Was Sam Raimi high? What was he thinking?
Things got hectic at the jazz club.